Hello, Instagram! It's another live dyeing session at Indigo Dragonfly. I don't know if anybody's watching yet.
I'm watching.
Are you joining us?
Good afternoon. Hello, we have lots of people watching now. Hi. Nice to see you all. It's a rather gray and boggy day here at Indigo Dragonfly Studios. It's very rainy outside. But we're going to do another live dyeing session. So welcome to everybody who's joining us. Hi. Okay, we're going to turn the camera around and we're going to get right into the dyeing. So welcome please to the Instagram Live Studios. Kim and Ron. There's a Ron.
Hi.
And a Kim. Hi.
So, hello. So, as we all know, Kate considers me her dye wench. She asks for a colorway, it happens. So today that's what's going to happen here. And she came across this photo. There's a better version of it on both of our Instagram posts of the coronavirus under a microscope. So yes, we are going to dye plague yarn. We're going to do a couple of different interpretations of it today. And Kate may be watching. Hi, Kate.
No, she's not. But
She's not?
Someone commented, "Oh my."
You know, there's a lot to be said about, not dyeing yarn based on a horrible virus. But in the end, I'm married to him. And, every act of destruction is also an act of creation. So if we are not able to be out at Knit City this weekend, then we might as well stay in and make some pretty yarn based on horrible things. Something very new for us. So here I go. So this is version 1.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to try and get in closer.
Okay, do you need to grab the stool or anything?
I'm sorry, I'm so short.
Well,
Okay, I'm gonna come around the other side. Please enjoy this lovely slow motion walk through our studio. Oh look, it's the instructions for how to dye. And we're here with the plague yarn.
Good. So we have 4 different bases in here, so you can see what happens on 4 different fiber combinations.
Just pause for a second. What bases are you using? We are using
Chameleon Sock, Kiwi Fluffin, Wing and Hooven DK, and Rouse Sport. Rouse Sport is 100% merino. Wing and Hooven DK is merino, yak, and silk. Kiwi Fluffin is 100% Polworth wool. Polworth is like merino. It's just another breed of sheep. And Chameleon Sock is extra fine, lovely, soft, and fluffy merino, cashmere, and silk. It's all the luxury in one silly skein. All right.
So what color are you starting with, Kim?
I'm starting with a gray. I tried to go for, the gray in the photo is kind of a bluey gray. So I've mixed up some of that, and now I'm mostly going to make this, if you look really closely at the virus, there's far too much detail in my brain. There's kind of a very textured look to the gray, so I'm going to dye in a very textured way.
And by textured, you mean squiggles, right?
I mean, squiggles, kind of graffiti, speckly-ish, but not really speckles.
I think the technical term is oops.
I know exactly what I'm doing. It's not oops. This is how I draw, by the way.
It's controlled oops.
It's controlled oops. It's orderly chaos is what it is. Okay, so that seems to be enough for one side. You saw this with Ron last week. I'm flipping it over. because it's near impossible to get both sides of the yarn dyed the way that I dye anyway, in one shot. And you want to make sure that everything is covered. So this is going to have many layers to it. So we're actually going to, after I make sure that I've covered enough of it, we're going to cook it for a little bit.
And what does that do, Kim?
We're going to cook it with some fixative, and as Ron said last week, we use citric acid as our fixative, and it's the combination of the dye we use and the citric acid and heat that make it bond with all the fibers in
Do
there.
not try this at home.
Do not try this at home. Do not try this with anything that you eat off of or with.
Studio though, fair game.
Yeah. We do not put ketchup in this bottle.
Is this plain tap water or is there acid? So at the moment, the yarn is just wet with water and
Yes.
and now some dye. And then as soon as we go to put it onto the stove, we're going to put some citric acid in there to help set some of this color so that Kim can do her layering effect.
Yeah. I like dyeing this way, and my recipes are say things like scribble, 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 scribble. Pause, flip, scribble, scribble, scribble. And these two don't appreciate the brilliance of.
Well, we appreciate it. We just look at it and go, she's dying that next time.
We appreciate it. We just can't replicate it.
We're very, very respectful of each other in the studio.
Someone says, I love the squishing noise. Yes, the squishing noise is fun.
Squish, squish, do you wanna?
Yeah, well, thanks.
Okay, so Ron's gonna put fix on it, and he's gonna heat it up.
And so for those people who are just joining us, what are we dyeing today?
We are dyeing the coronavirus as it looks under a microscope.
In our very fancy detailed picture. So we're going to do an interpretation of the coronavirus on yarn. Because why not?
Because we are us, and hey, at least it's not blood and bones and teeth this time. So the other interpretation we're going to do is we're going to dye this in the way that we dye most of the impervious yarns. Casey asked us if we would demonstrate how we dye impervious yarns, and so that's what we're going to do. So
Talk to them about the pot setup for
the
moment.
pot setup for impervious, because we want longer repeats, instead of having the yarn folded short ways, we just lay it out long ways, and that way we can get longer color repeats in the yarn. We could also put it out on the counter and hand paint it, but I find that really tedious, and this allows us to dye more yarn in a shorter amount of time. So,
Is the fixative in powder or liquid form? Doesn't matter. So we take the citric acid from powder form, and we mix it with water to make it liquid. And then that's what we use to put in the pots.
we could put it in as powder form, but then you need to make sure that it dissolves and it gets to all the corners of the pot. If we dissolve it before it goes into the pot, then we just have to kind of move the water around, and the citric acid floats to all the different places in the pot it needs to be. This is the official way that it looks. Okay, coronavirus. Color one. Color
Two.
two. There are these kind of little orange speckles in it. Also, Kate really, really loves orange, so, and I am her dye wench. Therefore.
The impervious yarn is also coronavirus inspired, yes. So we're doing
Yes.
two versions of it. One, sort of a regular dyed version. This is just waiting for some layering. And then the second version is imperviously dyed, which is dyed in a different way than our normal than our normal dyeing process, and that's just because we need the color repeats to be a certain length for it to work for the impervious shawl.
Yeah. Whoops. Sorry.
If you get dye on the camera,
It's my own darn fault. I know.
Yeah.
That's okay. Apple Care.
Hey. This is not a product endorsement.
So, you know how Ron does the pokey thing? I don't.
Kim does a squishy thing.
I do a squishy thing.
And you also have a lot more water there than I usually do. So.
I do because I like the colors to blend. And with beige, like Ron dyed last week, there isn't as much space for dye to spread out. But in these impervious colorways, we're fine. It's all good. And then just because there's like these little yellow specks, I'm gonna put.
Plus, Kate totally doesn't like yellow.
Kate totally doesn't like yellow. So there'll be some spots where the little hot yellow comes out. It's hard to see here, but in the finished yarn, I promise you it happens.
Here comes the flippy bit.
It doesn't flip as well if Ron doesn't yell flip from the other room. Okay.
It's like making a nice brisket.
So the important thing when you're flipping your yarn is obviously you want to keep the colors in the same order, or else you get a very interesting mutant yarn.
It's true.
The mutated strain.
X-Men yarn.
Yeah, flippity flip. Yeah, you could totally make a cute and cuddly zombie squirrel from coronavirus yarn. That would be hilarious.
An excellent idea, and there are several patterns we can recommend for such a thing. We will link to them if and when we decide, we all decide, you guys included, that this is worth being a color that we actually sell. There.
Oh, we're going to sell this?
What, you just want to give it to people on the streets? Like the virus.
No.
Have we mentioned that we are very sick and twisted people? Do not give the virus to people. That would be bad. Okay.
We have some new people joining us.
Hi, new people.
Hello, everyone joining
Hi.
us.
I feel like I'm screaming at the camera. Am I
Well, you don't.
screaming?
Yeah, you're being a bit loud, but
Okay,
it's okay.
We will do the calm and quiet yoga dyeing.
No, you don't have to be that quiet. So for people who are just joining us, we are doing, surprise, surprise, because it's us, a coronavirus inspired colorway based on this picture of what the coronavirus looks like underneath the microscope. So Kim is dyeing two different versions of this colorway. The version she's working on right now is dyed in an impervious fashion, and impervious is Kim's shawl design that uses flame shapes. The second version is in process on the stove. This is not completed, it's just one of many steps. And so it's a more regular colorway dyeing process.
Next week we're going to get a drone.
No, that's just Victoria when she hasn't had tea.
Like,
We're too much tea.
So the
speaking of which, if you're enjoying these sessions and you'd like us to keep doing them and you want to help keep them free for everybody, we have a tip jar. If you go to the link in our bio, we've put together a tip jar so you can give us tips at different levels, which pays for our time and equipment and hydro and so on to bring these videos to the general public for free. Every little bit helps, and as long as we keep a steady flow going, we'll be able to keep offering these on a regular basis. So, here's the hot yellow little speck that comes up occasionally. There's only a tiny bit of it, so there's only a tiny bit of it in the yarn. And the gray of the background, this will lighten up a lot from what you see here. And then the red and the orange that you see in the virus.
No, we don't have a Patreon.
We don't.
Just a tip jar.
Just a tip jar. Patreon would be a good thing. No, Victoria's saying no Patreon. She doesn't want one more thing to worry to have to monitor. So we won't be doing Patreon. But this helps us keep going. What are we doing now? We're putting this on the stove. So I'm handing it over to Ron.
Put it on the stove there.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That way we have a side by side.
Excellent.
And then comes the cleaning up bit.
Ooh.
Isn't this exciting?
But I don't do windows. just about everything else, but.
It's true. He's very good.
So Ron is putting fix in the imperviously dyed pot, and just a reminder that the fixative is our citric acid solution, which helps to set the dye along with the heat.
I'm going to grab a rag because my hands are wet. Alright. So the first pot is probably ready for the next stage.
Want it on the counter?
Yeah, but I also want the water drained out, the excess drained out. So what we've done with this first pot is we've set the gray dye with the citric acid and some heat. And now because there's already citric acid embedded in the yarn, the next stage means that we won't need to add more citric acid. The citric acid will help the colors stay in place as I place them in the pot. Green.
If anybody has to go to the bathroom because of this, I do apologize. How low do you want this?
Pretty low. Like Darby low.
How's that?
That's pretty good. Thank you.
So we've essentially drained out the majority of the water that was initially in the pot. And this is just another way to allow the dye to really sit where Kim puts it instead of traveling around the pot.
Keystone Cops.
Clean bad. Rawr.
Okay.
Yes, we're reducing the water so the dye will stay where we put it, or where Kim puts it, yes.
So.
Make sure you're standing at least 6 feet away from the yarn when you do this.
Or 6 feet away from me? Is that what you're saying? Okay. I'm gonna try.
So last week, people were asking what types of tools and stuff we use for dyeing. And here you can see in one pot, we've got measuring cups, we've got squirty bottles, we've got fingers, gloved fingers, and all sorts of dye tools that we use just to create different effects on the yarn and to create some different textures.
And I'm going to stop there. Put it back. Heat it up. This one's there we go.
So Ron's just putting a little bit more citric acid on the top where the dye was just placed. So these are our two different versions of the coronavirus inspired yarn. On the left hand side, we have what we would call a normally dyed pot, in that the skeins are laid horizontally across the pot and folded over. And then we have an imperviously dyed version of the same yarn that things are laid across the pot vertically. And that's just so that we get the length of repeats that we want in order for the yarn to work for the impervious shawl that Kim designed. Fancy. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have any
this is question
comments?
period.
This is the part where we sit around and wait for yarn to heat up. Kim's now just switcherooed the yarn.
Well, just because it'll be easier for me to work on it from this angle.
Yeah.
La la la. They're very, very quiet. This is very unlike them.
Does anybody have any suggestions as what the color name should be of this yarn?
Yes.
Oh yeah, give us some yarn name suggestions. And yes, we do have different bases in the traditionally dyed pot. Sorry, that's the wrong one. It's this one. In this pot, we have 2 skeins of Chameleon, 2 skeins of Kiwi Floof and Sock, 2 skeins of Wing and Hooven DK, and then 2 skeins of our new Rouse Sport. Will you add water to the lower water one at any point, or is that a little bit enough? So it had lots of water when we first started, but we've actually drained it out so that Kim can do some more precise placement of the dye. The amount of water that was initially in it made the skeins really saturated and wet, so we don't need to worry about adding more water now that we're dyeing it.
We may add a little more fix.
Yeah.
At the end.
Is the amount of time needed to cook the yarn the same regardless of the dyeing technique? No. Generally, if there's less water in the pot, the amount of time to cook it is lower, just because you don't have to worry about heating up such a large volume of liquid. But some of the dyes do take a little bit longer to exhaust, and that's the term that we use to tell people when the dye has fixed properly to the yarn. But generally, lower water level means that it'll take less time to cook. The little squirty bottle is just citric acid.
It always catches on the gloves.
Will it need less cook time for the dye to adhere now that the yarn is hot? Yes. So Kim is just flipping the skeins in the traditionally dyed pot at the moment, because what happens is, because the yarn is folded in half in the pot, the interior of the yarn can sometimes not get dye to it because of the way that the skeins are stacked. So by flipping it, she's able to make sure that there's less white, or in some cases gray, in the skeins, and gives her more surface to dye on. So for those people just joining us, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are today dyeing 2 colorways, one colorway in 2 different ways, inspired by the lovely coronavirus. And based on this lovely picture, right over here of what the coronavirus looks like under a microscope. Yay! Because we're just that kind of people. So we have 2 pots on the go currently. We have one version dyed in an impervious fashion, so dyed in a way that will work for Kim's impervious shawl. And then the other version is in process over here, and this is a traditionally dyed pot. Some people would call it a speckled yarn or a tonal yarn. And it's just in process now. So we're using the same colors and just 2 different techniques. So imperviously dyed and traditionally dyed. Kim is spritzing the yarn with citric acid, which is our fixative.
And she is stuck. There you go.
The virus looks like it was knitted. Yeah, it does. It's very textural.
It looks very cozy.
Yeah, it looks like a cozy virus, maybe because it makes everybody stay home.
We called him Mitch.
Okay.
Mitch the Itch.
So that's it. At this point, everything will cook, and then we will rinse it and wash it and
Spin it.
spin it. And spinning just takes out most of the water, so that, like the spin cycle in your washing machine, so that when we hang it up to dry, it doesn't drip all over our floors and create puddles.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think that's it for this dyeing session.
Okay, and so we'll post some pictures of the finished yarn once it's spun and dried and hung. So these are our 2 versions, our imperviously dyed coronavirus yarn and our traditionally dyed coronavirus yarn. And we'll think about some names. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. And thank you so much for joining us. And from all of us here at Indigo Dragonfly Studios,
Bye!
bye!
Remember, the tip jar that allows us to keep doing this and keep making it free for the general public is in the link in our bio.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.